Hey guys! 今日は怖い話します。
ハロウィンなので。
そうですね。まあ英語でね、ごめんなさいね。英語で怖い話をします。
よろしく。ヨーロッパの話？
アメリカです。本当のストーリーですよ。
ノンフィクションですか？
そうです。The story I'm about to tell you happened around 15 to 20 years ago. The story comes from a series of journal entries that were posted on the internet by a man named Ted. Ted was a caver, so someone who loves going into caves and exploring new caves. And he always went caving with his friend, but in the journals, his friend is just called D.
D, okay.
Because he wanted to be anonymous. In this story, they went to a particular cave they'd never been before, and at a certain point in the cave, they found this hole in the rocks. It was about the size of a fist, and they were really interested. And when they came close to the hole, they could hear some, like, wind sound, which usually is a good thing, they say, because it means that there might be, like, bigger caves behind it. So they got really excited, and they said, what if we could be the first people to discover this new part of the cave? They tried to make it bigger, but they didn't have enough tools, so they had to go back. They were a little bit sad, but they were like, okay, we're going to buy some tools and we're going to come back to this cave. A few weeks later, they have a bunch of tools, like a drill, and they go to the cave and they start drilling. And it's really difficult because it's super hard, and they realize we're not going to just be able to enter this new part of the cave today. It's going to take many hours of work. But they say it's going to be worth it because we are going to be the first people in this new part of the cave. As they're working, at a certain point they hear a noise. And it's kind of like the noise of stone grinding against stone.
Like?
No, grinding. Like, they know it came from inside the cave, and they find that really strange. But it just makes them more excited to find out, right? But the work goes so slowly. So this goes on for many weeks. Sometimes they hear strange winds inside. Sometimes they hear the grinding noise. Sometimes they hear like a scraping noise, like... But they basically just become obsessed with this cave. Like, they started it, now they have to finish it. You can imagine that, right?
Yeah.
At some point, the hole is big enough for kind of his head to fit in. Like this big, right? So his head can fit in, but only if he goes, like, in a certain angle. And he can
scrape through it.
Kind of, but, like, just not far enough, you know? But, like, they can shine inside a little bit, and they can tell it is kind of a long, very narrow, small passage. But, like, they would have to be lying down and try to crawl through.
Yeah.
And one time, they bring their dog. It's something they do sometimes because the dog really enjoys it. You know, he can run free. The dog is really used to it. He goes in the caves all the time, and he loves, you know, jumping down the rocks. And, you know, they thought it'd be fun to bring their dog there, too. They do, and when he first enters the cave, the dog is very excited. But then the nearer they come towards the hole, the dog starts to get kind of nervous, and the dog kind of stops wanting to go further. And then once they're like, I don't know, a few meters away from the hole, the dog just starts making like whiny noises. It's clearly so scared, and it just backs away, and they keep calling the dog because they kind of were hoping that if the dog was small enough to go through the hole, they would put it through the hole, but the dog wouldn't even go near the hole. Like, the dog was so scared. That was the first time that Ted thought, well, maybe something's inside there. Maybe there's another animal. They keep drilling, and they think they're almost ready to, like, try to fit their upper body through. Ted is drilling. He's, you know, just another day of drilling and drilling. But suddenly, even though the drilling's really loud, he hears a huge loud scream. A long, terrified scream that's coming from inside the hole. So he stopped drilling. His friend D also heard it, and they both looked at each other like, what the hell was that?
Yeah, just go, just run.
This was a moment where Ted got scared.
Yeah.
Because he thought the sound didn't sound like an animal.
Okay.
It sounded like a mixture of a man that was scared and an animal that was in pain. But strangely enough, and Ted says this in his diary. He doesn't know why he kept going. To this day, he doesn't understand why he didn't just run away then. It was an obsession. They had to find out. So they kept going. They just switched positions, you know. It was Beat's turn. He kept going. And afterwards, they left the cave. And for the first time, he felt like he was kind of glad to leave the cave.
Mm-hmm.
The next day, they come back.
Yeah.
And they make a big breakthrough.
Yeah.
I think it's big enough for Ted to fit through. He starts getting his head through, which again, he can fit through, but only just. So like, he has to angle his head like this way to fit in. And the only way he can get in is if he first puts his arm in the hole, then his head, and his other arm behind him.
Okay.
And then he shuffles in and kind of pulls himself through like this.
Yeah.
That's the only way he can get through.
Mm-hmm.
But he decides to do it anyways because he's so excited. He's like, I'm going to be the first one in this new part of the cave. And it's very painful because he's scratching himself against the rock everywhere. Yeah. But if he goes slow enough, it works. After, 20 minutes or so, it starts to open up. And he comes into this room where he can kind of start, straightening up a little bit. He can actually stand, which is great. At the end of that area, he sees like a formation of crystals, which is really pretty. Mm-hmm. He sees all these crystals and he takes pictures of them because obviously he wants to document it and then show his friend.
Yeah.
Because his friend wasn't big enough to fit through. After that chamber, the room opened up into it kind of went in a curve. And then he came into a big chamber, like a big open cave space.
Okay.
He got really excited. He noticed that the entrance of that cave was like a big round rock that was leaning against the wall a little bit. He took some pictures. He walks into the room. And on the wall of that room, he sees a strange sign, kind of as if it was drawn by like cavemen or...
I think it was natural.
Yeah. It was like a sign, but he didn't know what it meant. So he took pictures. He was like, wow, that means that there was like... life here. Yeah. He takes a bunch of pictures and then he decides he should go back. He doesn't want to go too far from his friend. So he goes back and he goes back through the first chamber and then the really like small part. It was really kind of, again, painful. He was scraping his face and his arms and stuff. Halfway through the really small part, suddenly he hears the rock sliding against rock sound again. And he starts to hear the scraping noise again. And suddenly, he just gets so scared because he knows it's coming from right behind him. He starts really kind of rushing out. He tries to show the pictures to his friend. He sees the pictures of when, the chamber went a little bit bigger. He sees the pictures of the beautiful crystals. But then all the pictures that he took in the bigger room with the rock and the sign, they were all gone. None of it was there. Which he just didn't understand how that happened because he took so many. He said, well, we'll just go back next time. I'll take more pictures. Then they call up a friend called Joe. They call Joe because he's also someone who loves going into caves, and he's kind of small, so he'll definitely fit. They go back with Joe. Joe and Ted go in together. Joe goes first, Ted goes after him. They both go into a little, really tiny space, and it goes pretty well, no problem. But then suddenly in the middle of the cave, Ted makes a mistake. He hits his head against one of the rocks. He gets really dizzy and it hurts really bad. So if he's this dizzy, he really shouldn't keep going. So they say okay, Joe, maybe you should go by yourself because it would be really sad if we just had to go home. I really want you to see this. It's so cool. He decides to just go back and wait with B so Joe can go. And as they hear Joe go deeper into the cave, they start to hear those really weird noises again. And that's when they realize that, they haven't told Joe anything about all the weird things that have been happening. They haven't told him about the noise. They haven't told him about the scream. Not about the dog that was scared. So they kind of get a little bit worried, especially because Joe's not coming back. It's 20 minutes, 25 minutes, 30 minutes. They don't hear from Joe. Ted calls into the cave, "Hey, Joe." There's nothing. No answer. "Hey, Joe." No answer. Must have been an hour later. They start to see the light from his headlamp. And they start to scream at him, Joe, are you okay? Are you okay? And as Joe is coming closer, they call again, Joe, are you okay? And he just answers no. And then they see that he looks really pale and really like he does not look good. So they give him some space to let him crawl back out. And before they can say anything to him, Joe packs up his bags and then starts leaving. So they quickly pack up their things and leave after him, and they ask him, like, what happened? Are you okay? And Ted asks him, did you see the beautiful crystals? Joe says no. Did you see the round stone? No. Did you see the sign? No. And Joe gets into his truck and leaves. And usually they were supposed to, stay at a motel together to go back the next day, but Joe just goes home, doesn't want anything to do with them. They try to call him for the next couple of weeks, but Joe doesn't respond. They try to go to his house, he doesn't open. They call his work, and they say that he hasn't been to work. And so Ted says, you know what, I'm going to go back into the cave. Again, this is a part where in the journals he says that he understands how weird it sounds for him to want to go back. But he says that at this point it became such an obsession that he was going to go back no matter what. So this time they brought kind of like walkie-talkies, but with a string, like 2 phones that were connected with a long wire so that they could communicate in the cave. And this time, when he's going from the real outside world to into the cave, he realizes that he feels bad about it. Something doesn't feel right. They keep messing stuff up, like they keep slipping, like everything seems to kind of go wrong that day. But they have their minds made up, so he's gonna go in the cave. He goes through the hole. This time it's like his 3rd time in, so he kind of knows how to, wriggle himself inside. He goes in and he notices there's barely any wind. He's in the room that's a little bit bigger now with the beautiful crystals. He takes some pictures of them, and then he decides to try out the phone. So he tries the phone and asks for B. His friend is there. They can easily chat. He's like, okay, I'm in this room now. I'm going to keep going. And his friend is like, yeah, that's fine. I'll just wait here. Just like have a good time. So he feels a little bit reassured. And then he enters the room with the round rock. Immediately he starts feeling just like he's not welcome there. He feels like the cave does not want him in there. He feels just really not okay. He enters and he takes a lot of pictures. He goes to like sort of the end part of that room, and he notices that there the room starts to get a little bit smaller again and disappears off into a different...
He didn't go that far before, right?
He didn't go that far before.
Okay.
He thinks, well, maybe I can go there this time. But he thinks, oh, I'm going to call again first. So he calls his friend again. It kind of sounds like his friend had fallen asleep or something. So he realized, like, oh, I must have been in here for quite a long time, taking pictures and stuff. But the friend says, no, it's fine. Like, you can really, like, do your thing. He's like, okay, turns off the phone. Just as he's about to go into this newer part of the cave, right behind him, he hears the rock sliding against rock sound again. It's just the most terrifying thing because he knows it's there with him. He knows he's not alone. He knows that something is going on. And he gets so scared, he just kind of jumps up from being so scared. And he jumps up so fast and so hard that he hits his head against the rock. And he's wearing a helmet, which is good because otherwise he might have cracked his skull. So his head was fine, but his spine, he feels something shoot up in his spine that hurts so much that he falls to the floor because it's just so painful. And also because of the big hit on his head, the lamp that was on his head is broken. So he's in complete darkness now.
Okay.
He's in complete darkness. He's in so much pain. He can't move, and he knows that there's something in there in that room with him in the cave because what else would make that sound? Then he realizes we always have spare lamps with us, of course. So he quickly goes in his belt and tries to get the spare lamp, but then he realizes that he forgot to put the batteries in. But luckily he did have a couple of glow sticks. He uses one of those and he can like see around a little bit, but he can't properly see very far. And he's so scared. He's so scared. He cracks another one and he throws it towards the stone, the big stone that he thought the sound had come from. He sees the stone and he doesn't see anything. First he sits there he doesn't know how long. He doesn't remember how long he sat there, but he was in so much pain and he didn't know what to do. But then he remembered the phone. He has a phone, so he tries to call his friend, but the phone doesn't work anymore. Suddenly there's no contact. So he starts to go back towards the stone because he wants to get out of there, but he has to go past the stone. He goes near the stone and suddenly he realized the stone is not where it was before.
Ooh.
The stone has shifted. The stone actually went over the cable and it cut the cable of their phones, which is why he can't call his friend no more. And he looks over the stone and then realizes that behind it now there lay another passage. And the stone used to cover it up, but not anymore. And the passage is very, very deep and very, very dark, and he can't really see how far it goes, but it seems to go on forever. And it's like really like down. It goes like really down into the ground. And that's when he starts hearing scratching noises again, and he freaks out. And so he throws himself back into the smaller part of the cave, and he starts crawling back out. And this is when, all of a sudden, a really disgusting smell starts to come all around him. It smells like rotting death. And it comes out of where that passage was. This time he just throws himself face first into the small little passage, and he starts crawling and crawling and crawling, and he just feels his flesh ripping on the stone, but he doesn't care because he's so scared, and his back hurts so bad from where his spine was injured before, but he's so scared, and he starts yelling to his friend, please start packing your things because something is in here with us. We have to go right now. He just keeps going and he's in so much pain, and his friend is getting panicked as well. He's like, what is that smell? What is that smell? And he's like, I know, it's coming. So he keeps crawling and crawling and crawling through the little space, and then until he falls out and he hits his shoulder, but he doesn't even care. And they both start running through the cave, and usually they have to use like ropes for safety, but they don't even care. They just climb and climb and climb out. The rope that they use, it's like a rope that goes all the way to the outside of the cave. They're almost out the cave and they're trying to get up, and suddenly they feel something tugging at the rope. Something is tugging at the rope from deep inside the cave. They manage to get out of the cave. And then they quickly get their pocket knife and start like cutting the rope. And they manage to cut the rope. They quickly get into their truck and they drive away. And they don't speak of it. No, both of them, they don't want to talk. They're so scared. They just leave. They both go to their home, and Ted is home for the next couple of weeks. The longer he's alone at home, the more he starts to feel strange. He starts to not be able to sleep because he has nightmares, and when he's awake, he has the feeling that someone's watching him. Someone's in the house with him. He starts to even like see figures, or sometimes he smells that disgusting smell he smelled in the cave. One night, after a particularly bad nightmare, he wakes up and he's really scared. He wakes up with the feeling that he has to go somewhere. Like something is making him go somewhere, so he follows the thought. He gets into his car and he drives to like the top of like a mountain area that has like a view of the city. And the strange thing is, when he arrives there, Joe is there as well. Ted comes up to Joe, and the first thing he says is, I have to go back into the cave. And Joe looks at him and Joe says, yes. The last entry in his journal that he wrote those 15 years ago was a message to his family and friends saying, I know you all think I'm insane for wanting to go back into this cave, but I have to do this. I feel like I will never be free unless I face what's in that cave. And then he says, much love, Ted. And he promises to update once he's out of the cave and he can properly tell you what's in the cave. But the problem is, he never updated again. And no one knows what happens to Ted after that. どうでしたか？
怖いね。
What?
So after him, like, has anyone gone to the cave?
Nobody knows what cave he was talking about. He
Right.
never specified where it was.
But somewhere in America.
そう。これはなんか昔からの有名な話。
怖いですね。
怖い。A lot of people say that passage that he found, that was the passage to hell, and that was like the devil trying to call him. We'll never know. 日本の話と比べるとどう？バイブが違う？
いや、けどちょっと日本のやつっぽい感じもあるよ。
あ、そっか。
ちょっとなんか何かわからないっていう、ちゃんと見てないっていうの、日本の怖い話もそういうのが多いから。
そうね、それが一番怖いね。
そう、日本のやつは they never show the ghost。とりあえずいいと思ったらいいねと登録をお願いします。もし皆さんの中でこれ怖い話ですよっていうのがあったら、名前かリンクかコメント欄で貼ってもらえたら嬉しいです。
怖いよ、私多分。怖すぎる。私、I get scared so easily. Like, after I looked up this story, I couldn't sleep. And, like, I couldn't go anywhere without Kazuki because I was scared.
ちょっとめんどくさい。
でも、多分今日もめっちゃ怖いから、隣にいて。
Yeah, I can tell you another horror story.
あ、怖い。
Next thing in bed.
やだ、怖い。怖い、もう怖い。
とりあえず今日はそんなところで。
So, let's turn on the light. I'm scared. じゃあ、see you next time. Bye bye. Happy Halloween. Should we do the creepy hey guys?
Well, how do we do it?
Hey guys.
Okay, 3, 2.
Hey guys.